Ever since Elden Ring's release, Farum Azula has had almost as many mysteries as Bonnie Blue has DNA inside of her. And although there are a lot of mysteries to do with Farum Azula that will never be solved, in today's video I want to solve quite a few of them. For example, where Farum Azula actually was, how big it was, and where the meteor hit. Just to preface, that isn't me bullshitting, I got my really smart physicist friend to help me with this, and it's really interesting. Not to mention delving deeper into the Gloam-Eyed Queen, Godwyn, and the Ghostflame's connection to Farum Azula. That is just a brief skim over of what we're going to talk about in today's video. If you do end up enjoying, please consider leaving a like and subscribe as it greatly helps the channel and it lets me know you're enjoying this style of content. Without any more messing around, let's get into it. If you've played a good bit of Elden Ring, you've definitely seen these chunks of Farum Azula that fell from the sky when Farum Azula crumbled. But they aren't simply ruins. There is so much that can be inferred by their locations. Inside of Limgrave, there are 40 unique big fragments. Inside of the Weeping Peninsula, there is 18. On the right side of Melania, there is 12, and in the middle section of Melania, there's 4. There is an evident trend of Limgrave being the centre point of the most fragments. And considering this, it's only fitting that I found the location of Farum Azula inside of Limgrave. If you go to the left hand side of Stormveil, you'll notice that side is completely battered with holes. For a long time, people have believed this was due to Godwyn, due to his husk at the bottom of Stormveil. However, I do not believe this. I do believe Godwyn has infected these wounds, as we see traces of his influence. Saying that, I do not believe he actually caused the wounds upon the castle. Instead, I believe these wounds were done by a little meteor that crashed into a not so little Farum Azula. Towards the area of Godrick's arena, there is a massive boulder-shaped hole inside the wall. If you go into Godrick's arena and then go to the throne room, on the outside of that throne room there is massive claws scraping down. Almost like as something fell from the sky, a dragon that might have been part of Farum Azula also fell. And as it fell to the ground, tried to claw onto something, leaving the remnant we see on the outside of the throne room. These wounds look like craters, like something, a meteor, has crashed into them, or at least fragmented parts. On the other side of Stormveil, there is hardly any damage. There is only some structural damage, which to me suggests the meteor came from the left-hand side of Stormveil. Proof that a meteor struck this side of Stormveil comes in the bridges on this side. There are 3 of them that have been completely obliterated. 1 leads from the underside of Stormveil, and 2 lead from the Chapel of Anticipation directly to Stormveil's main area. The destruction of these bridges was not due to natural means, it was not due to withering away over time. There is another bridge on the Chapel of Anticipation that is perfectly fine, perfectly good health. However, these 3 bridges have been destroyed, almost like something roughly ploughed through them. Limgrave has far more connections to dragons than you might think. First of all, there is a Church of Dragon Communion right next to Stormveil. Considering what we've talked about, it's a very big coincidence that I don't actually think is a coincidence. There is also a Beastman of Farum Azula that can be found in a dungeon inside of Limgrave. The only other place we see this is in Caelid, which can be more understood as it's close to the bestial sanctum that, as we're going to talk about later, is also very much connected to Farum Azula. But why on earth would this Beastman be all the way in Limgrave? It wouldn't make sense, unless you considered Farum Azula was above Limgrave, that it was above Stormveil Castle, and that the whole area of Limgrave is connected to dragons. Theoretically, if a city was struck by a meteor, most of the fragments would fall directly underneath the city, as we see in Limgrave, where there are 40 fragments. The second most place is Weeping Peninsula, and even then that only has 18, showing there is a higher concentration inside of Limgrave, suggesting Farum Azula was likely right on top of Limgrave. Considering what we've just talked about, the damage on Stormveil and the destroyed bridges, on screen right now is likely the path of the meteor, and it ends up right in the spot where all the debris from the Divine Towers suggest a meteor hit. If you would like further information on what I'm talking about regarding the Divine Towers, I suggest this video by Tarnished Archaeologist. It's quite a few years old now, but it is still very much informative. If we assume as a rough estimate that Farum Azula was located directly above Stormveil and Limgrave, we can use it as a centre point, and then if we measure the furthest points the debris are found, we can find out how big Farum Azula actually was. The first thing that was needed was a unit of measurement on how big the map actually was, and specifics, for example, how big is a kilometre regarding the furthest zoomed out map. For a long time, the unit of 90 square kilometres has been thrown around for Elden Ring's map. But there wasn't as much of an in-depth study regarding that compared to this other study that I found. This other study concluded that it was 79 square kilometres. This study gives a more in-depth method on how they reached this result, leading to me believing this more as a result. 2 further points that also proves this is actually the case and the correct measurement is the original post had someone else do this as well to eliminate human error, and then another commenter did a different method and also received the same result. That being 90 square kilometres. They figured out that 1 kilometre was equal to 6.25 inches. The problem is some people have TVs, some people have monitors, so it makes it very hard. But considering 3 different people got the same result, I figured the problem was most likely with my monitor, and so I had to make a scale. On my screen it was 21.6 inches from the very top to the bottom. I then divided that by 6.25. This gave me on my screen 3.456 kilometres. However, this is on my screen and not lined up with their study, so I had to do 10 divided by 3.456 to get a scale of 2.89. This means basically that any of the kilometres I get now, I have to times by 2.89 so it becomes equal to that of their results. What I then did after I figured out this scale is I found out the distance between the very furthest points the debris fell. After using the scale, the Limgrave side comes at 2.589 kilometres and the Melania side comes at 2.867 kilometres. I would have been stumped here now. I love science, I love biology, I love chemistry, but physics is not my thing. The same cannot be said for my friend who's a physicist, who just so happens to be really cool and decided to help me with this issue. He has calculated a rough estimate on how big Farum Azula actually was. Before we delve into the size though, and the calculations, it needs to be made very clear that these results are based on certain assumptions. On the screen right now is a list of these assumptions. It is very, very important that you take this into consideration. If you want to look at it more, feel free to pause the video. Throughout the video, I've said quite a few times that I believe a meteor hit Farum Azula. And while I do believe a meteor hit, I haven't really talked about what kind of meteor I think it was. I think instead of it just being a flat out plain meteor, I think it held the Elden Beast. We know the Elden Beast came down on a golden star. We see the impact inside the Shadow of the Erdtree trailer. But we don't know much apart from that. So much would line up if the Elden Star was really what destroyed Farum Azula, that it was the Elden Beast. It would also explain the hatred between the ancient dragons and that of the Golden Order. Grandsax quite literally invaded Lindale, attacking the Golden Order. But for what reason? Well, I think a massive golden star holding the Elden Beast, which is directly associated with the Golden Order, if that came hurling through your city, destroyed it, that's a very good reason to be angry at the Golden Order and Lindale. The supposed impact site of the Elden Star is also in close proximity to Lindale. Lindale is the location of the Erdtree, and before it was known as the Erdtree thanks to the Golden Order and the Elden Beast, it was the Great Tree. The Elden Beast would have been drawn to this, and considering it's close by, it's likely that's where it crawled, infecting and corrupting the Erdtree into the golden tree we see. Not only does it make sense thematically that the Elden Beast is what destroyed Farum Azula, by using the height and width of the Elden Beast, the following calculations were created, as without the size of the meteor, we would not be able to understand and know how big Farum Azula actually was. And hint hint, after we've talked about the results, there is actually something else that further proves that this is the Elden Beast that crashed through Farum Azula. Going on to the results now, assuming the chunk velocity is around 150 to 300 ms, we can take an average of this and use 225 ms, which gives a city radius of about 1.25 kilometres and a diameter of around 2.5 kilometres. Considering it looks like the city was circular, it would have an area of 4.2 kilometres squared. The uncertainty for the radius, diameter and area are all on the screen right now. Just having these numbers makes Farum Azula hard to picture. And so in the process of looking around the map for stuff I could measure out to give you and me a better idea of how big Farum Azula actually was in comparison to everything else, I found something else. If you go to Farum Azula inside a smith box, you'll notice the meteor field around Farum Azula is static, and when it's like this it forms a circle. If you take this circle and measure it, you'll find out it has a diameter of 2.5 kilometres and it has a radius of 1.25. This just so happens to be the exact numbers that my friend calculated when calculating the size of Farum Azula originally. Also, I just wanted to mention the way that I calculated how big this asteroid field was due to Liurnia. Basically what I did was I took the ocean part of Liurnia and I put that directly into this circular bit. By looking at what part of the lake it actually got to, I was then able to look at the actual map and calculate the distance, which gave the calculations that I've literally just said. I just want to clear something up. Farum Azula in-game is found next to the mountaintop of the Giants. However, what I've just talked about suggests it was located in Limgrave. Farum Azula, as we see it, the crumbling version, is spinning around in a tornado. If you take into consideration the path of the meteor striking just above Stormveil and Limgrave, then there is a possibility the trajectory would end up with Farum Azula being next to the mountaintop of the Giants. On the topic of the mountaintops, I noticed something strange when I was looking into Farum Azula. Even an unrendered version of the Fire Giant's Forge shows the crack. However, if you look from Farum Azula, unrendered and rendered, it shows no crack whatsoever. The Farum Azula that we play in isn't some inaccessible realm. We can go from the 4 belfries to Farum Azula. It's Placidusax's arena that is outside of time. Or at least that's what I thought, but considering this, I feel like there's some kind of distortion with time, allowing bits of the present and past to exist simultaneously. This would explain how Malekith is both found in the Bestial Sanctum and in Farum Azula. We will go more into the Twin Bird later in the video, but I just wanted to say there is further connections between Farum Azula and Stormveil through the Twin Bird. The Twin Bird can be found inside of Stormveil. This further cements the connection between Stormveil and Farum Azula. There is also the Storm King. The Storm King was a hawk, a bird. What is the Twin Bird? Well, a bird. And what is associated with Farum Azula? The Twin Bird. There is a deep-rooted connection between Farum Azula and Stormveil. Who exactly the Storm King was, we don't really know. We know that it was a bird, a hawk. We can get the spirit ash. But apart from that, information is limited, and unfortunately, we're probably never going to know. Inside the chapel inside of Stormveil, which hadn't been cut off from the mainland like the Chapel of Anticipation, the Golden Order has revamped it and turned it towards their ideals, further showing how they tried to turn the populace's eyes away from old beliefs and towards the Golden Order. Further proof that Farum Azula and Stormveil are connected are the Banished Knights. They both use storm attacks in both Farum Azula and in Stormveil. Deep inside of Stormveil, there is a husk of Godwyn. It corrupts Stormveil. But what we need to talk about is what lines the corridor, the Ghostflame. The Ghostflame links to Destined Death, the Gloam-Eyed Queen, Godwyn, Deathblight, but that's what we're going to talk about in a minute. I first want to talk more about this corridor. On the floor of these corridors looks like crude examples of the graves we see inside of Farum Azula. The burning of the bones of the fallen leads to the rise of the Ghostflame. The beastmen that are put into these coffins inside of Farum Azula come back to life, and when they do, they have the abilities of the Ghostflame. Littering the corridor is Ghostflame. I believe the corpses and offerings in this corridor are used to light these torches. Another connection to Farum Azula from the Ghostflame is the fact these statues that you see inside of Farum Azula, you can actually find this figure inside the DLC. Same wand, same baby, same hat, same clothes, same everything. It is all the same. This figure is directly linked to Farum Azula and definitively connects the Ghostflame and Farum Azula. The twin bird is said to be an envoy of an outer god and the mother to the deathbirds. Quite literally every corner you take inside of Farum Azula, there is imagery of twin birds. And it doesn't look like dragons, they look like birds. Considering the amount of Ghostflame wielding enemies inside of Farum Azula and the twin bird insignia, I do believe that Farum Azula is connected to the Ghostflame. What we're going to talk about next actually links back to this and further proves it. The Deathrite birds not only use Ghostflame, they also use Deathblight, something that is associated with Godwyn. If you look all around Farum Azula and the Bestial Sanctum, you'll find mermaid insignias and mermaid people. If we go and look at Godwyn, he has the tail of a mermaid. One of Godwyn's followers uses the Ghostflame, and when the Ghostflame is used, a symbol pops up. The right side of this symbol seems to be the curse mark of death, which is intrinsically linked to Godwyn and to those who live in death. Not only is the curse mark of death found on the spell for this Ghostflame, it is also found identically on Fear's Mist. Fear's Mist applies Deathblight, further connecting the Ghostflame and Deathblight. The Ghostflame and Deathblight are intrinsically linked together, but there is another kind of death that is also linked to these two. That kind of death is the Gloam-Eyed Queens. Located inside of Farum Azula is the foreskin duo. These two bastards represent the Gloam-Eyed Queen. They share her brooch and they use her powers. Now why on earth would they be inside of Farum Azula? Well, we'll get to that. First of all, let's talk about Malekith. Malekith defeated the Gloam-Eyed Queen and stole destined death. He's now intrinsically linked to the Four Flames, and he has 100% embraced this, for he is found in the Bestial Sanctum, somewhere that is sacred to Farum Azula. A lot of the aforementioned beastmen that have been turned into Ghostflame creatures, their graves, their preparation, is at the Bestial Sanctum. Malekith is also addicted to Deathroot. He needs it, further connecting Malekith to all the things we've talked about in today's video. Deep underground in the Nox cities, the chests of the Nox have what looks like the Gloam-Eyed Queen upon it. She is wearing a robe and she has a brooch that looks very similar to the one we see on the Godskin Nobles and the Godskin Apostles. A very similar figure is found inside of Stormveil, Chapel of Anticipation, Sol and the Redmane Castle. Each one of those locations is linked to Farum Azula either directly or by proxy. The statues of this figure inside of Stormveil and inside the Chapel of Anticipation are linked due to Stormveil and Limgrave's connection to Farum Azula. The Redmane Castle is located right next to the Bestial Sanctum, and considering the Bestial Sanctum's location, it seems likely that Caelid was inside the Dragon Empire's territory. Even Sol makes sense. They worship the frigid sun, the eclipse. The frigid sun has always sounded to me like the Ghostflame. The sun, aka Grace, devoid of light, frigid and cold, just like the Ghostflame, which gives off an ice debuff. They are also trying to revive Godwyn there. Godwyn is associated with destined death, the Ghostflame, Deathblight, you name it. These four locations are directly linked together, aka linked through the worship of this jar lady. It's definitely worth mentioning that in a lot of these locations, there is a figure that looks like Marika holding a jar above this other jar figure. They're two different figures, they're two different people, but they are shown a lot together. Marika obtained power through a seduction and a betrayal. Perhaps the one she betrayed was this jar lady, although what that seduction and betrayal exactly was is something we're probably never going to know. This jar lady's clothes looks quite similar to that of the Gloam-Eyed Queens that we see in the Nox inscriptions. I believe this jar lady is the Gloam-Eyed Queen. We don't know exactly what happened to Placidusax's god. All that we know is that they left. They abandoned or they were killed. We don't really know. What we also aren't ever told is who it was, just that it was a god. In my eyes, considering everything we've talked about in today's video, the most logical explanation on who the god is would be the Gloam-Eyed Queen. Deathblight, the Ghostflame, Destined Death, and the god-killing flames are all without a god. I believe this god is the Gloam-Eyed Queen. There is further proof of this. If you go into the chapels where these statues are, you'll notice a quatrefoil. Although the quatrefoil has meanings to it, the interesting part to me is the 4 points. There is also 4 circles on the primordial Elden Ring. There is also 4 flames. There is also 4 circles on the Golden Road, which, as we're going to talk about now, is directly linked to Farum Azula. The Nameless Singer did an amazing video on the Golden Road, and in it gave proof that the dragon civilization, aka the Dragon Empire, created the Golden Road. One such piece of evidence was the 4 rings found upon every tile of the Golden Road. These 4 rings are only found inside the primordial Elden Ring, found in Farum Azula. The 4 rings are not in the Golden Order's Elden Ring. Chunks of Farum Azula can be found on this road, meaning the Golden Road was created before Farum Azula fell. The statue inside the chapel inside of Stormveil is not the original. Every single chapel of this religion has the same sort of statue inside, the Jar Maiden, who is probably the Gloam-Eyed Queen. However, inside of Stormveil, it's a Golden Order statue. Considering Godric is the one in charge of Stormveil at the present time, it makes sense. Now, Lindale probably existed far before the Golden Order. After all, it is at the very base of the Erd Tree that was once the Great Tree. But in the present day, just like Stormveil, it is ruled by the Golden Order, hence the manipulation by the Golden Order. Previously, I said the jar figure was the Gloam-Eyed Queen, and that she was intrinsically linked to this story. Further evidence of this comes with Fia. Fia is a deathbed companion, whose sole role in her culture is to gather the warmth of warriors and then breathe new life into the remains of an exalted noble. Fia is intrinsically linked to death. If you take a close look at Fia, her attire, and the accessories she's wearing, she shares a striking similarity to the Gloam-Eyed Queen that we see on the chest of the Nox. Fia was chased away from her home when she got awoken by Grace. Grace is an enemy to those that follow the Gloam-Eyed Queen, for Grace is associated with the Golden Order, the same people who defeated the Gloam-Eyed Queen and stole her power. This would finally explain why she got chased away. It would also explain her interest in Godwyn. Godwyn is the one responsible for making those who live in death. Those who live in death often use the Ghostflame. The Ghostflame and Deathblight are connected, and the Ghostflame and Deathblight are also connected to Farum Azula, and Farum Azula is connected to Destined Death and the God-slaying Flame. They are all interconnected, and if Fia is a follower of the Gloam-Eyed Queen, it would explain why she is so invested in Godwyn. A last connection between Godwyn and Farum Azula comes from the Dragon Communion Church. At the part where you actually commune and there's the red flame, there is a symbol of mermaids, further connecting Farum Azula and Godwyn. The primordial Elden Ring symbol is found inside of Farum Azula, in Malekith's boss room. This Elden Ring is completely different to that of the Golden Order's Elden Ring. There are 2 options. 1, it's a completely different Elden Ring from Pisidusax's age. Or 2, it's the same Elden Ring, however when the Elden Beast crashed into the lands between, the Elden Ring was altered. It's one of those things where it's 50-50, it could be one or the other. The important part to note is the fact there was a different Elden Ring, and the Elden Ring was present in ages beyond just the Golden Orders. We are 23 minutes and 50 seconds into the video, but it's a very good point to mention that anything past this, if my voice sounds strange, it's because I'm incredibly hungover and I had way too much to drink last night. But this video is coming out today whether my body likes it or not, but I did think it was important to mention that I am hungover, so my voice might be a bit different to the last 23 minutes. The Helfen's Great Steeple talks about the Helfen. It says the sword is mirrored after it. The sword is in the shape of a tree. I believe this tree is the Great Tree before the Golden Order, and the Great Tree of Pisidusax's reign, the age of the Ghostflame and of death. The lamplight is the equivalent of grace for this age. It is said to be in similar appearance to grace. However, it can only be seen by those who have succumbed to death in battle. Although we see attacks that are of the Ghostflame, we never see anything that is in similar appearance to grace. Not in the sense of grace. The statues, yes, but that doesn't really count. As the lamplight can only be seen by those who have fallen in battle, I believe this explains why the great tree just looks like normal wood. If Elden Ring took place in the age of the Ghostflame, I definitely think we would see the lamplight in both the form of sights of lamplight and guidance of lamplight. Time and time again, I have seen this primordial Elden Ring and the figures beneath it be called Malekith and Marika. But this does not make sense whatsoever. First of all, there is no Golden Order stuff inside of Farum Azula. It's all its own culture. The only exception to this is the Draconic Tree Sentinel and that of Malekith, but even then they are intrinsically linked to the culture of Farum Azula. It would not make sense for an old statue to just casually have Marika. A piece of evidence that people like to give is the fact that Malekith is a loyal hound. There's 3 wolves there. But where's the other 2 wolves that would have grown up alongside Malekith, that are the same size as Malekith? Now of course these 2 wolves could have died, but considering the fact we never hear tell of 2 other wolves of the same age as Malekith, the quote-unquote Marika statue looks nothing like Marika. We have never seen a Marika statue look like this. Different clothes, no braids, you name it. It doesn't match up. And finally, the fact that Marika is not found anywhere else inside of Farum Azula. All this points towards this not being Malekith and Marika. If not Malekith and Marika, then who is it? I think the best explanation would be the Gloam-Eyed Queen. But who are the 3 wolves? Well, what kind of flames do we have? We have the Ghostflame, we have destined death, we have death blight, and we have the god-killing flames. This once more gives us 4 flames. What do we see in this description? 4 figures. The humanoid figure is likely the Gloam-Eyed Queen with the god-slaying flame, and the 3 other wolves symbolise the 3 other flames. Something that lends credence to this idea is the fact these statues are found directly beneath the primordial Elden Ring, which as we know is of the age of Placidusax. Something that's definitely worth mentioning, there is a ton of deathbirds that spawn directly onto Farum Azula chunks. This further connects to the Ghostflame and Farum Azula. I now want to put it out there what I believe the hierarchy of this civilization was. I believe at the very top you had the outer god of death. We're not given a direct name, we just know it's an outer god, so I'm going with death. Then you have the god and consort, aka the Gloam-Eyed Queen as the god and Placidusax as the consort. Then you have the twin birds, which is an envoy of this outer god. Just a comparison, an envoy of the greater will is the 2 fingers. Below the twin birds is the children of the twin bird, aka the death birds, who are graveyard firekeepers who rake through ashen remains. And finally, the beast men. If the Gloam-Eyed Queen does have a humanoid form, just like we see in the statues, then having children with an ancient dragon would lead to what we probably see as beast men. We see Golden Order scions whose blood has been diluted to shit and back, and they no longer have much power. I believe the same can be said with that of the beast men. It would also finally explain just where they've come from. And that, everyone, is a wrap. That is officially the longest video I have ever done on the channel, and I am so happy it was on this topic. This video took so long to make, but I'm definitely happy with it, and I really hope you guys did enjoy as well. If you did enjoy, a like and subscribe would go a long way, as it greatly helps the channel. Without any further ado-daddling, please friends, don't you dare go hollow, and may you find your worth in the waking world. See you on the next one, and goodbye.